Every single empire that ever rose, every massive fortune ever built, even every crash, panic, and revolution that completely tore a country apart. They all trace back to the exact same invisible force. And what's absolutely wild about this? This force literally has zero inherent power of its own, right? It's not weapons, it's not some grand ideology. It's actually something you might be holding in your hand right now. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into the fascinating history of human value.
It brings us to a really fundamental question, one we kind of never stop to ask ourselves. What is money, really? I mean, just think about it for a second. How on earth did our species, which once upon a time spent its days literally trading goats for grain, manage to build this sprawling, globally connected civilization on top of something that, technically speaking, is worth absolutely nothing?
Seriously, let's look at the reality of this. If you were to cut open a dollar bill right now, you'd find nothing inside. Zip. There's no energy, no nutrition, no warmth in that little piece of paper. Yet people will work 40 years for it. But here's the kicker. Money wasn't just sitting around in nature waiting to be discovered, like fire or water. No, it was this bizarre, honestly brilliant invention that was pieced together over thousands of years. And it wasn't even created to produce wealth. It was actually invented to solve a massive everyday problem of human trust.
Which brings us to part one, the problem with barter, and a world before money.
Okay, so picture this. You're a fisherman standing on the shore at dawn. You've got a boat, totally full of fish, but your boots just fell apart. You desperately need sturdy new boots from the village shoemaker, right? But the shoemaker doesn't want your fish. His family is full. What he actually needs is firewood for the coming winter. So economists have this perfectly clinical term for this ancient daily nightmare, the double coincidence of wants. Basically, for a simple barter trade to even happen, two people each need to have exactly what the other wants at the exact same time. And without that magical alignment, the whole economy was just constantly stalling out.
Because those wants almost never perfectly lined up, our poor fisherman was forced into this agonizing multi-step process. First, he has to leave the shore, wander around, and track down a total stranger who actually wants fish and just so happens to have extra firewood. Then he makes that trade. And finally, he circles all the way back to the shoemaker to trade the firewood for the boots he wanted in the very first place. I mean, he's losing hours, maybe even days, just to make one simple purchase. Multiply that kind of friction across a whole growing society, and you can totally see why humanity desperately needed a universal language of value.
So, humanity started searching for something, anything that everyone could agree to trust. And different societies got incredibly creative with this. They used cattle, but, cattle can easily get sick and die right in the middle of a negotiation. They tried salt, but salt dissolves in the rain. Cowrie shells traveled these staggering distances, but a lucky harvest could literally ruin their worth overnight. And then there were those massive yap stones. Honestly, great for big communal agreements, but absolutely terrible if you just wanted to buy a quick snack. Eventually, all these fragile early agreements just fractured under the massive weight of scaling civilizations.
Which leads us to part two, the invention of coins and buried trust.
Civilization obviously needed something way sturdier. People realized that gold and silver didn't rot, they didn't dissolve, and their supply couldn't just accidentally multiply. This drastically sped up trade. But introducing raw metal brought its own totally new set of headaches. Doing business with raw chunks created this exhausting new ritual. Before every single transaction, merchants basically had to act like scientists. They're asking, is this real? Is it pure? How much does it actually weigh? Pulling out the scales to debate every single time cost valuable time and money, every single day. Then, around the 7th century BCE in Anatolia, the kingdom of Lydia came up with a fix that completely rewired the logic of trade. They started stamping standardized pieces of metal. So instead of endless weighing and biting and testing by cautious individuals, the Lydian coin carried an official mark verifying its weight and purity. It's a real game changer. This allowed governments to literally manufacture trust, turning a heavy piece of metal into a traveling, ironclad promise.
Moving on to part three, how empires broke trust and the temptation of easy money.
Now, these standardized coins absolutely solve some massive logistical nightmares. Suddenly, a Roman soldier stationed hundreds of miles away from home could be paid in trusted silver that was instantly valued by everyone around him. But, running an empire the size of Rome came with a bill that literally never stopped growing. Facing massive debts for unending wars and grand monuments, Emperor Nero quietly did something incredibly sneaky. He ordered the empire's coins to be debased. Basically, they minted them with a little less silver, quietly swapping it out for cheaper filler metal. It was essentially a magic trick, a hidden tax designed to secretly fund the empire without officially raising a single rate.
But hey, the public wasn't fooled for long.
When sharp-eyed merchants handled these new, lighter, duller coins, they noticed almost instantly. So they did what any of us would do. They hoarded all the older, pure silver coins in their private stashes, and they quickly spent the weak, newly minted ones out in the marketplace. This dynamic, the idea that bad money drives out good, completely devastated public confidence. It caused prices to skyrocket and sparked brutal inflation. The real crack here wasn't just in the metal, it was in the belief. And that brings us to part 4, the paper money revolution and the hidden fault line.
As medieval trade routes started stretching all the way across Europe and Asia, hauling literal carts of heavy gold became a massive, highly expensive liability. It made merchants prime targets for bandits and pirates, so a lighter, safer method was desperately needed. And the ultimate solution came from a completely unexpected group of people: goldsmiths. See, they already had these reinforced vaults, so merchants just paid them a small fee to safely store their gold in exchange for a simple paper receipt. Soon enough, merchants realized, hey, we can just trade the paper receipts in the marketplace instead of moving the physical gold. But here is where history really pivots. The goldsmiths noticed that most of the gold just sat in the vault completely untouched for years, so they quietly started lending out a portion of that stored gold to other borrowers and charging interest on it. This was the staggering, totally accidental birth of fractional reserve banking. Crazy, right?
This entire paper revolution proves something absolutely profound about human psychology. From the vaults of those European goldsmiths all the way back to the government-issued paper notes of China's Song dynasty centuries earlier, society learned an incredible secret. Money never needed to be inherently valuable. It only needed to be believed in. Wealth could now move weightlessly across the globe, based entirely on shared momentum and our collective trust in a little piece of paper.
Which takes us to part 5, the gold standard and the cost of keeping promises.
Now, getting millions of people to entirely trust paper over solid metal, that required a massive, unshakable guarantee. Enter the gold standard. This wasn't just an illusion or blind trust. Under this system, every single banknote in circulation explicitly represented a fixed, specific quantity of real gold sitting safely in a government vault. You could, at any given moment, walk right into a bank and swap your paper for the real physical thing. So the crucial point here is that this ironclad guarantee brought massive stability. It spurred incredible global investment and completely fueled global commerce throughout the entire 19th century.
Yet as we've seen time and time again, perfect systems rarely survive contact with the real world for very long. During calm, prosperous years, the gold standard functioned brilliantly. It enforced economic discipline and genuine stability. But history loves to throw curveballs. When the world faced massive financial panics, deep economic collapses, or the utter devastation of world wars, governments desperately needed cash, and they needed it fast. Suddenly, the gold standard revealed a fatal limitation. It acted as a rigid cage, physically preventing governments from creating the money they needed to survive the crisis.
Which leaves us staring right at the dawn of the 20th century, facing a truly terrifying question. What happens when the gold cage breaks? What happens to our invisible force, this globally shared hallucination of value, when the ultimate financial safety net fails, and there literally isn't enough gold in the vault to back up all the promises we're treating? Well, that is the exact question that built the modern world we live in right now.